All right, we are live, season 2, episode 17 of the list. Brett is out sick. We are sending him our best wishes, but I am joined by who might as well be a part of the show at this point, Kevin Fielder from Rivals. Kevin, you at least have one good football team that you follow. How does that feel?
I only have one good football team I follow because I'm also an FAU grad, and well, it ain't getting any better on that front. So.
Yeah, obviously talking about Kansas State there, and as a fellow Big 12 fan and a UCF fan here, it's definitely been a rough start to the year, and a rough tenure in the Big 12 for Gus Malzahn so far.
Yeah, it hasn't been great. I thought they showed promise in that Iowa State game, and then they lost all that promise in literally a week.
Yeah,
because I don't think you could follow up a performance like that against Iowa State, whether you win or lose, and like. Arguably, they should have probably played the end of that game a little bit better, but you can't follow that up by whatever happened against BYU. That's just like
BYU was almost a little more like what they looked like against Florida and against Colorado. I think Iowa State was just you put everything out there type game, and yeah, it's been a tough start for UCF so far.
Yeah, it's not been great.
Do you think? Who do you have winning the Big 12? I mean, obviously Kansas State, BYU, Iowa State, all there, kind of near the top. What do you think?
Oh, man, it's one I've struggled with because I think K-State is like the best team in the Big 12. They've at least proven that outside of the BYU.
Biased or unbiased?
A little bit biased, but also like I just think that like when you look at the numbers and stuff, like they are probably the most effective Big 12 team, but BYU has looked really good. Outside of the one game against Oklahoma State where they struggled, but they found a way to win it. Iowa State's defense is insane, and they keep teams to like 14 points a game. And so, like, I think the Big 12 championship is going to be one of BYU and Iowa State against K-State. And then, I mean, I guess it just depends on matchups because if K-State plays BYU again, I'm a little hesitant to pick BYU because I don't know if you can beat K-State twice, but if it's like Iowa State, man, that Iowa State team looks really damn good. And they just find ways to win games that like other teams don't. And so I'm so hesitant to bet against Iowa State with the way they've played so far this year.
And while we're on the college football subject, really quick, who do you have winning the national championship at this point? I mean, we're close. We're getting here to November. And what do you think Heisman-wise?
Oh, geez. Heisman-wise, it's Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. He is on track to beat records that we haven't seen broken since the 80s. And a lot of people want to say Travis Hunter, and I don't disagree. I think Travis Hunter has been really good this year. He plays both ways, and that's something that most guys don't do. But, I mean, we're talking about a running back who is playing out of this world right now. And I mean, we haven't seen a running back play this effectively in years, and it looks like Boise State is like the favorite to make the playoff out of the group of 5, and that's entirely because Ashton Jeanty is a freak of nature.
Yeah, you even see NFL running backs do his kind of standing up.
Yeah, it's like he's now influencing the NFL, and he's not even in the NFL, so it's hard to bet against him. National championship-wise, I don't think it's Oregon. I know they're the number 1 team in the country right now. Don't think it's Ohio State.
It's hard to pick Oregon.
It's hard to pick Oregon because it feels like it's all going to fall apart eventually. And it's just a matter of when, not if. Ohio State, I'd love to pick. I need to see how they play this week against Penn State. Miami is like a team I think could win it, but that defense is so inconsistent that I don't know if they can get to that point. It's such a cop-out answer, but it feels like this is the year where Georgia wins it.
Oh, it feels like this is the year.
It feels like this is a year where Georgia just wins it. I just like, because they're incredibly well coached. They have the playoff experience. They've got like all the things you want out of a national champion. And they're also really good on defense still. Like, don't look, but they're still really good on defense. That offense is a problem, but that defense is really good. I just like, man, is it a Georgia year again? Because I can't think of like another team that I feel really confident saying wins it this year.
It's interesting because we talk about how it's hard. You feel like it's all going to fall apart for Oregon. It's hard for me and my Dolphin bias to believe in a quarterback with the last name Beck. Like there's
that's absolutely fair.
There's just something about Carson Beck, and it has nothing to do with him. He could be the perfect prospect. It is just simply the name Beck that I have a hard time believing in.
It feels weird, but even though they lost to Oregon, I think Ohio State is probably second for me. Just because I think that like they found ways to win. That offense, when they're rolling, is one of the best offenses in college football, and they have so much talent that like feels like a team that figures it all out. But again, I need to see how they play against Penn State because they need to be able to win a game like this for me to call them a national champion.
So 2 questions staying in the Big Ten. One, being a Kansas State guy, do you think Will Howard's the type of guy that can win a national championship?
I don't think he's going to screw it up enough where he can't win one. I don't think he's a guy where, like, if you need him to go score 45 points and throw for 5 touchdowns, he probably is not going to do that. But I don't think Ohio State needs that. I think that they've got so much talent at the skill position. They've got 2 running backs who are insane. They've got the wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. That name has thrown me for a loop for the last 10 years, it feels like. Yeah. Jeremiah Smith, they've got a decent offensive line, though they've had some injuries there. And Chip Kelly is still an incredible play caller. When he wants to like actually call plays, which is what he's doing now, it's like, I mean, that offense has the potential to be the best offense in college football.
And then other Big Ten question, do you believe in Indiana?
I love Indiana. The vibes they bring are awesome. Kurt Cignetti's like my favorite coach in college football right now. But I don't believe in them enough to win the national championship. I think they might be able to make the playoff. Depends on if they can make it to the Big Ten championship game, which might be a challenge. They don't have to play Ohio State in the regular season, which will absolutely help.
I think they do.
Oh, they do. Yes,
they play. Right. So the last 4 games, they play at Michigan State this week, home against Michigan, at Ohio State, home against Purdue.
Right. They avoid Oregon. They avoid the other one. But so like that Ohio State game probably tells you where they are, and they need to win that game to probably make the playoff, because if they don't win that game, they don't make the conference championship game. So I love where that team is at. I think it might just be a year too early to start talking about national championships.
And then last Big Ten question, what about Penn State?
Very much like Ohio State. I need to see them win a game first, because James Franklin does this stuff every year where he looks promising for half the season and then it all falls apart at the end of the year. And so I'm not believing it until he shows me that it's not the same James Franklin led Penn State team. So if they win this week, we could start talking about them being a national championship contender because of the way that offense runs with Adam Kotelnicki. I think is how you pronounce that name. The offensive coordinator's name is, again, another name that I've just never figured out. But the way that he runs an offense, Drew Aller at quarterback has looked fine. They've got probably the best tight end in college football in Tyler Warren. And so they've got enough pieces where you think that they could potentially make a run for the national championship. But I need to see them do it in a game like this first.
So this week, Happy Valley, Penn State, Ohio State. Is this the James Franklin game? Is this the game? A, is this the James Franklin game? And B, is this the game that, if it's the James Franklin game, that sets Ohio State fans over the top about Ryan Day?
It's either the Ryan Day wins a big game, or it's the James Franklin game. And I don't know if either fan base will be extremely happy if they lose this game, because James Franklin, to some degree, has not been able to pick up a marquee win like this. And Ryan Day has not been able to pick up a marquee win like this. And so it seems like Ryan Day will win the game this year. He will beat Michigan this year because Michigan is awful. But beating Michigan this year is probably not enough. Like, you probably need to beat Penn State because Penn State is a top 5 team and you're going to Happy Valley. Like, this is a game you got to win if you're Ryan Day. And I don't know if, if they lose this game, I think it pushes some fans over the edge. I don't think they lose this game, but if they do, oh boy, it might get ugly in Columbus.
And just for our producers and those that that keep notes and tallies on our show. It took 9 minutes and 24 seconds for us to talk about the Michigan Wolverines. That's about 9 minutes longer than it would have taken if Brett was here. Yeah, they're bad this year. I also don't think it helps the Ryan Day case that Brian Hartline is a hot name on the circuit, and also that Mike Vrabel is kind of lurking around there in the background.
It doesn't help, but they're not going to fire him if they go far enough, right? Like, I think that,
Right.
like, I don't think this is a national championship or bust kind of thing, but they can't get, they can't be a one and done in the playoff. They can't be a top 4 seed if they win the Big Ten, or an at-large team that loses in the first round or loses in the I think it's the semifinals. Like, you got to be able to go to at least the Final Four. You got to be one of the last teams standing, and if that doesn't happen, I think we're talking about a situation where Ryan Day is on the hot seat, and whether it's an in-house hire like Brian Hartline or an out-of-the-house hire like Mike Vrabel or maybe Kurt Cignetti from Indiana, if he wants that last job, like, it gets really interesting if Ohio State doesn't make it past like that first round of the playoff.
Yeah, if we're talking about a situation where Ohio State, if they don't win the Big Ten, they're not getting one of those first 4 seeds. So essentially, if they lose this game to Penn State, the best they're going to get is the number 5 overall seed. And that puts them, what if they're in a 5-12 game with a team like Boise State? And they lose at home to Boise State.
It's very interesting if they lose to Boise State, because I don't know if anyone survives that. I don't know if you can survive that. Boise State is very much a one-trick pony. They run the ball down your throats. They just do it better than anyone else does.
What if Ohio State, what if we're talking them losing to Texas A&M, to a Clemson, to an Alabama?
Man, it gets really tough if you don't win this game against Penn State, and frankly, if you don't win out, because those teams in that first round of the at-large games are not easy matchups.
Yeah.
Texas A&M has looked really good. Clemson has looked really good. Boise State is a dangerous team if you get them running. I would be worried if we got to the point where Ohio State had to play one of those games, given how they look in games that matter.
Yeah, well, we prolonged it for 12 minutes and 40 seconds. I did everything I could to keep us away from talking about it. But the Miami Dolphins, the reason we're all here, Sunday, me and Brett were talking about it, where the wheels kind of fall off a little bit if you lose that game against Arizona. And the craziest part, I saw it somewhere, somebody said it to me on Sunday or Monday. Do you realize that the Miami Dolphins are about a total of 8 inches away from being 0-7? Yeah.
And they are, to that same degree, they're like 6 points away from being at least 500.
Yeah.
It is, they are in the most unfortunate position in the NFL, in the sense that, like, you never want to be so good at losing games.
Yeah.
You also don't want to be so bad at winning games. And they're like, because they are they're effectively 8 inches away from being 0-7, like being 0-7 and it all being completely lost. They're also, what was it? The Tennessee game was like 7 points, effectively.
Well, it wasn't.
It wasn't, but it sure felt like 7 points.
It was 19 points.
Oh my God, it was. The Indianapolis game was close. I think it was.
The Indianapolis game was the only close one.
But I mean, you win that game, you win the Arizona game. We're talking about a 500 football team. We're talking about a team that's over 500. And it's like, those were both games that you should have won.
Yes.
And like, unfortunately in the NFL, you don't get should have, could have, would haves. You get whether you did or not. And the truth is they didn't win either of those games. That's why we're sitting here at 2-5 fighting for our playoff lives every week.
I mean, at this point, you have to win a game, and it starts on the road in Buffalo. But talking about that Arizona game, the one good thing I liked Tua 28 for 38, 234 and a touchdown, no interceptions, and only sacked once. That's a positive. The negative, and I didn't see the behind angle, looks like that snap hit him in the hand that went into the end zone.
I think that snap was just, and people don't want to hear this because everyone's just going to want to blame Aaron Brewer or Aaron Brewer, excuse me.
Is that what it is?
I think it's Aaron. But
Aaron or Aaron? Aaron.
I don't know exactly what, I'd have to find the pronunciation guide, but everyone's going to want to blame Brewer for it. The truth is, I think that's just that Tua and Brewer haven't taken many snaps together because Brewer got hurt in preseason and could not play most of preseason. So you got like none of the training camp reps. You got none of the preseason reps. You had week 1. You had like a few drives in week 2. And then Tua gets hurt. And like Tua was able to practice a little bit during the week. But I think some of it is just, man, they haven't had that many reps together. Those are normally issues that are in week 1 of the regular season. The only reason why we're having them in week 7 or 8 of the regular season is because Tua is just coming back now. So it is effectively like week 2 for the entire offense being healthy, which is unfortunate because it came in arguably the worst spot that it comes in, because if you're at midfield and that happens, Tua falls on it and you just end up punting the ball away. But it goes 5 yards over your head. It keeps bouncing. I mean, you can't do anything about that when it's in the end zone.
In that situation, and I think at the angle that he was going at, he had to kick it out of the back of the end zone. But you got to give at least a little thought to trying one time to scoop it and kick it.
It wouldn't have, I think, made that much of a difference. They would have been a safety either way.
Well, the argument side is that if it's a touchdown right away, at least you get the ball back. A safety, you're giving them the ball. But
at some point, you got to trust the defense. At some point, the defense has to make a play. Like the truth is, like, should he have just kicked it out and gone for the touchdown? Like whatever. The truth is, the defense has got to do something, man.
Yeah, they didn't really do much.
Like the truth is, like we talk all the time about complementary football, and complementary football is not just the offense and defense and special teams all playing well at the same time. It's that when the offense screws up, messes up, the defense has to be in a position to cover their ass.
Yeah.
And like if you're not going to be able to come up and make a stop in a game that matters, truth is, man, it doesn't matter. Like if it's a touchdown or a safety, you're going to lose the game either way. It's just how much do you want to delay the inevitable?
I think that part of that was a culmination of the defense being in bad situation after bad situation over the first 6 games of the year. And finally, we're in a spot, we're scoring some points. And then something like that happens and you just kind of get the air taken out of you. I think there are some other things that we're going to look at on the defensive side of the ball. I think David Long's been terrible.
David Long shouldn't be playing anymore. I don't care. The truth is, at this point, you need to find someone else to do it, because it has now been 3 or 4 games of just, man, what are you doing out there? Are you lost? Do you need a map to find out where the run gap is that you're supposed to hold is? Because truth is, he's just lost right now. And everyone wants to blame the defensive line for the run game issues. I think we got to start looking at that linebacker position, because Jordan Brooks is inconsistent at times. I think he's been great. But when you have a weak link in in David Long, like, you're not winning a lot of games.
Yeah, David Long's been terrible. I don't think the defensive line has been backbreaking, but I definitely think the defensive line, as we go into the offseason and talk about the offseason, I think the defensive line is definitely a spot that you can look at and expect us to look to add something.
Yeah, I mean, because unfortunately, and everyone's going to point to this being bad process by Chris Grier. I don't agree with that. The free agent signings that you made there outside of Calais Campbell have just not done much. I thought Benito Jones was a good signing. It just hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
They signed like Neville Gallimore. He didn't end up making the roster just because he wasn't good enough. Like the guys they signed who were expected to fill in that run game problems, just not replaced anything of Wilkins. They haven't even been average. Like Benito Jones is not an average run blocker right now or run stopper right now. And that's a problem because he's playing your nose tackle position. And like the other thing is, truthfully, they've been kind of screwed by injuries. You can't forecast Jalen Phillips having another season-ending injury. Like that is not something that you can foresee. And it's incredibly unfortunate that it happened to a guy like him because I feel like if you have him and you have Agba and you have Chop, who's now not having to play seemingly every snap of the game, the defensive line just probably looks better because you've got more talent there. And like, I think that's just the unfortunate thing is like right now they're trying to make it work with the sum of their parts, and the sum of those parts are probably just not good enough without elite inside pressure from Zach Sealer, who's hurt. So again, something you can't forecast. Like everyone's going to go, well, everyone gets hurt on the Dolphins. What are you supposed to do? Forecast a dude getting hit in the eye? Like it's so easy to point towards injury issues, but when some of the injuries are just like, man, what am I supposed to do here? It's like, it's unfortunate.
I do agree that there are some things you can't forecast. I think the things that really piss people off are the signing Odell, signing Shaq Barrett, signing guys that are seemingly don't have 100% of a buy-in interest in playing football over guys like Van Ginkel. And then drafting players like a Chop Robinson, like a Patrick Paul, who you and I have been talking about since draft day are 2025 picks that are not 100% locked in players that were supposed to help this team. Whether they are or not, they weren't supposed to. So I think when you're talking specifically about Chris Grier, that's what people point to when you have frustrations. Not touching the offensive line, not finding another good receiver, not fixing the tight end position, not fixing the interior offensive line, although I think Aaron Brewer is having
I think Liam Eichenberg's been good. I don't think he's been bad. Truthfully, I don't think he's the problem along the offensive line or the offense in general.
I don't think he's the problem. I don't think he's so there's a place in between bad and good. It's called average.
He's been average. If your right guard is average, I don't really think that's an issue.
Truthfully. Liam is not the biggest issue on the team right now. But I also wouldn't be surprised when we do eventually overhaul this offensive line if he's a piece that is.
I mean, I'm not keeping him. I'm not keeping him over like he's not a guy who I'm just like, well, I can't lose him kind of thing, right? But like, I don't think this is a thing where it's like, well, we got to get a right guard this offseason. If we don't get a right guard, we're screwed.
We have needs.
Yeah, we have actual needs that need to get addressed. But like on that topic, right? OBJ is the one I agree with. If you knew that he wasn't going to be healthy for the start of the season or ready for the start of the season, why'd you sign him? Why'd you play the song and dance that you thought he would be ready for week one when all the reports coming out now was he was never going to be ready for week one? Why did you run it back then with Malik Washington, Taj Washington, who has been hurt, and Braxton Berrios if you knew that OBJ wouldn't be healthy? The Shaq Barrett one is unfortunate to some degree because I don't think they thought he would just up and retire. Like, again, it's a thing that you can't really forecast. Those things just kind of happen sometimes. I think the bigger issue for me is that you neglected positions that you knew would be issues. It's like you knew the tight end room was not good enough. And your solution to fixing the tight end room was bringing in Jonnu Smith, who's not a tight end. He's a move player who plays big slot half the time, and hoping that Julian Hill puts it together. And God forbid, guys, we need to stop playing Julian Hill. I don't care.
Holy shit. Holy shit. I've been telling myself I'm trying really hard not to curse on this show here. Like it's something I'm working on going forward, but Julian Hill, holy shit. Man.
That's the thing for me that's irking me about this season is that like the same guys are messing up every game.
Yeah.
And every game they end up starting. It's like if Julian Hill is not playing well, if he's committing holding penalties, if he's fumbling the ball, I don't care that the Dolphins recovered it. If he's not being effective at run blocking, which is the reason why you kept him, why is he playing?
Over Elijah Higgins, who actually, I'm pretty sure, scored a touchdown that he got called down at the end.
Elijah Higgins is bad too. Like, if we're just going to be honest, Elijah Higgins is also just bad.
It was just ironic on Sunday seeing him get a couple catches.
But it's like you had Hayden Rucci, who I thought looked pretty good in the preseason, and you cut him, and then you have John Embry come out the next day going, this isn't the end for him. We want to keep him. So why'd you cut him for a third quarterback? Why, man? Why?
Yep.
Not even a third quarterback, a fourth quarterback, because at that point, Tyler Huntley was not on IR. It's like, okay, well, you knew that Julian Hill was an issue. You knew that Durham Smythe was an issue. There should have been a little bit more foresight into fixing that room, especially because you look at every team that is run by the Shanahan-like offense, the 49ers, the Vikings, the Buccaneers now with Liam Cohn,
Packers,
I think
Rams.
the Packers, the Rams, all these teams have good tight ends. It's like, and some of these teams have elite tight ends. George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson are elite tight ends.
Tucker Kraft is getting there.
Tucker Kraft is a good tight end. Cade Otton is like, why don't you have a guy, excuse me, who is just going to be solid? Yeah. And it's not like this is like a position that you can't find a solid tight end.
Me and Brett have spent so many hours talking about the tight end classes over the last couple of years. Probably over the last 2 to 3 years, Brett and I have spent, hundreds of hours talking about these tight end classes for us to pass every single time and play Julian Hill.
I'm going to look this up real quick because now I'm interested. I'm going to look up the 2023 free agency class. I just want to see who was signed at tight end.
I think it's Gesicki. There wasn't much, I think, from a free agency standpoint.
But I think there were still guys who would have filled needs.
Yeah.
And if I just look up 2024 tight ends. All right, you have Colby Parkinson was never available, I don't actually think. Noah Fant was never actually available, I don't think. You had Will Dissly. I would have probably gone out and gotten Will Dissly.
Absolutely.
You had Gerald Everett. I would have probably gone out and gotten Gerald Everett. Yeah, okay, this class was not very good. But I'm even looking at guys who are available in the free agent market right now. Just go give CJ Uzomah a call, man. He's better than Julian Hill. I know the bar is at the floor, but at some point you can't just keep running the same guys out expecting different results.
Well, I think at this point they're gonna.
At this point you may not have another choice, but
is there any hope?
Yes, because the AFC is also really bad. And you may only need 9 wins to make the playoffs. And truth is, it probably is not happening. If you beat Buffalo this week, suddenly the mood changes a little bit. Suddenly the mood goes from, man, this season's kind of washed to, oh, man, we can beat Buffalo? Maybe the season isn't washed. It's like, it's crazy what one game does. It's crazy what one game does to a fan base, because it's like you could be the most broken fan base out there and then you win a game.
Well, you beat the Bills, and you're like, well, the next 3 games are the Rams,
all winnable.
And Patriots.
If you get to 500 at any point in the season, man, suddenly the season doesn't look lost.
You get if you beat the Bills, you win 4 in a row. You're a game above 500 on Thanksgiving night at Lambeau. That's best case scenario.
And you close the season off with 2 division games against the Jets, which the Jets are worse than the Dolphins, which is impressive.
That is the one saving grace of this season.
It
makes me so happy to watch the Jets play football every week.
Yeah, you have the Browns, who I mean, they're fine. Like, I think Jameis is going to make the team better if they want to keep
I'd
playing
rather
him,
play Deshaun than Jameis.
which I think you may just get away with it because I don't know if they're going to bench Deshaun Watson with how much they're paying him.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's like even if you play, excuse me, even if you play Deshaun or Jameis Winston, it's like that's still a winnable game. So we're talking now about 2 games, like 3 games at the end of the year that are winnable. I don't think the Texans are very good. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
They're not like a Super Bowl contender like people thought they'd be. It's like it's very much suddenly, man. If you win the Buffalo game and you can get into and you just ride that into a streak, it's like we've seen the Dolphins do this before as well. Because they asked two about it when they were 1-7 to start the year and they went 8-1 to end the year. It's like they found ways to bull crap their way into wins, and so it's like the season's not at a total loss. But man, the game's got to start happening now. We can't like because if you lose next week, the margin for error goes from you can lose 3 games the rest of the year to you can lose 2 games the rest of the year. You got to be dang near perfect. It's like the situation changes every time you lose a game again. And so it's like at some point you got to find a way to win a game, man. It's like you got to find something to change
how
the
long?
mood.
How long are we going to do that? How many more weeks are we going to do this for? We weren't supposed to beat Buffalo. We'll beat the Rams.
If you lose to Buffalo and you lose to LA, the season's over. The season is over, and we'll have other conversations. And so it's like they got to go 1-1 in these games at least. Truth is, like they got to go 1-1. You should probably go 2-0 if you're gonna keep talking about how like we're not afraid to look this in the mirror. We haven't been good enough. We'll be better. Show it, guys. I don't want to hear about it. I want you to show it on the field.
And one of the things I think that comes from that conversation, and it's interesting because we talk about if you lose to Buffalo and you lose to the Rams, the season's over. But the trade deadline's 2 days after the Buffalo game. Are you a buyer or are you a seller? Is somebody like Mostert, somebody like Jeff Wilson, any of the veterans on the team?
You could trade Jeff Wilson now. We ain't doing anything.
Well,
if a team comes and offers me a 6th-round pick, go ahead, man.
If the team offers me a bag of Fritos, and I'm not even a big Fritos guy.
I think like outside of that, I'm not a big fan of selling because I think this team is not like I know everyone else wants to go. They're looking to rebuild down the barrel. No, they're not.
No, but if somebody's going to offer you, for example, a playoff team has a defensive lineman go down, I could see a team giving us a conditional 7th for Calais Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, Calais Campbell won't be here next year, so if you can get value for him and you're out of the playoff race, then sure.
I would trade a guy like Cater.
I think he's been good this year. I don't want to lose him.
Let me ask you this: with the way he's played, how high of a pick does it take to give up Javon Holland?
None. Just sign him. What are we doing?
Are we going to?
We should be. I don't like. Wasn't the entire point of losing Christian Wilkins that you'd be able to sign Waddle, Phillips, and Holland to extensions? And so again, that also opens up the point of like, what were you doing when you lost Christian Wilkins if the plan was not to re-sign the other young guys on the roster who might be more valuable? It's like, I don't know. I mean, if the plan isn't to sign him, then sure, trade him or just wait and get the comp pick for him, which I think is stupid. But
to me, when you're making moves, and I've felt this way about the Dolphins for a long time, when you're making moves, you have to be strategic and think 5 or 6 steps ahead. And I feel like this Dolphins regime just makes moves to make moves and doesn't think about the way all of the pieces will affect future moves.
Yeah, it's so weird to be like, I just don't like it when we do this stuff of like, and this has been my biggest issue with Chris Grier. I think he's a fine drafter. I think he's good at player acquisition. The issue is that like, I lack I don't know what the plan is sometimes. I don't know if the plan is to like upgrade at certain positions and like treat positions X, Y, and Z as premiums, or if it's that we're going to build through the draft and sign low, like higher risk free agents, because we haven't seen them follow one plan. They rebuilt, they tore it down, they rebuilt it. They got all these picks and they did fine. Like they got to a position where they were competitive, but then they just suddenly lack that foresight of like, what are we doing next? What's the next move? Because it's like, it's unfortunate that you lost Wilkins and Robert Hunt because other teams who were really bad and had a ton of cap room decided to pay them out their minds. You can't do anything about that. That sucks. But it's like, I don't know. It's like, why was there not more foresight to go get another offensive guard? Why did we not draft one, man? It's like, I have no issue with the Chop Robinson and Patrick Paul pick because I understand that they're not 2024 picks and that anything you get from them this year is an added bonus. But it's like, was there ever a thought in your mind of like, after you got those two guys, maybe we should not draft two wide receivers? Maybe we shouldn't draft another pass rusher.
And speaking of draft, this is the point that I want to plug Jalen Wright, because Jalen Wright has been mistreated 2 weeks in a row now. Why in the world is Jalen Wright carrying the ball 2 times?
Why is he barely on the field? Why am I having to go do the next strain to go figure out where he is on the sideline? Come on. You traded up for this guy. You made this guy a premium. We didn't make this guy a premium. You decided to trade up for him when you had Achane and Raheem Mostert. Use the dude now, man. Like, this is what I'm talking about when it's like with Chris Greer sometimes, and to some degree also Mike McDaniel, because he's not void of criticism for this kind of stuff. It's like, if you were going to trade up for Jalen Wright, and I understand that you had Achane and Mostert, why is he getting 2 carries when your team is 2-5? Yes. Shouldn't he be getting more? Isn't this the point in time where you're looking for any solution to your issues?
But the thing is, you give him you give him carries in the New England game. He carries the ball 13 times for 86 yards. You win a game with him essentially leading your backfield. Then you put him on, give him the ball 5 times against the Colts. He's averaging 6.5 yards a carry. You're winning the game. You take him out of the game and lose. Then he gets 2 carries against Arizona, averages 9 yards a carry. Nope, doesn't go back in. Instead, did he get 2 touchdowns? Yes. But you put in Raheem Mostert, who literally averaged 2 yards a carry.
It's like, it makes no sense to me, because it was like, after that New England game, I thought we had turned the corner and we had figured out that he's a major part to this offense.
Yes.
And then it's not like he was bad against Indianapolis either. It's not like he was just ineffective against Indianapolis and you go, okay, he's clearly not ready to go play big time minutes, right? It's like, he was good against Indianapolis too. And then you just decided in a game where like the offense was struggling and you couldn't, like at the end of the game, you couldn't sustain drives. That feels like where you bring in a guy like him, who's athletic, who's fast, who's going to wear teams down, who's going to get you the yards that you need, and go use the dude, man. It's like, this is like just, and again, it's like this, then there's the Mo Kamara thing of like, he's active one week and then he's not active the next week, even though he played well against Indianapolis. It's like, the process of some of the stuff that we're doing right now is head scratching to me. It's like the process of how we're trying to get this team to that next level doesn't make sense to me. This stuff shouldn't be happening in year 3 of a regime.
Yeah.
It's like, at some point, there should be foresight where if you draft a guy, there is a clear development plan. And I don't know what the development plan is for Jalen, right? Because it's not like you're playing him in certain situations. And it's like, okay, you know what? He's only going to be playing like the first half because we don't want him in high leverage situations yet. Okay. Or it's like, okay, well, he's not going to play third downs because we don't trust him in pass block yet. Okay. But it's like, sometimes he plays a lot, other times he doesn't play. You have to figure out what that is. It's like, it's like this team is 2-5. These should be things that you're trying to do now. Like, not 5 years, like not 3 games down the road when the season's over and you go, okay, now we're going to start playing the guys. Play them now.
You mentioned when I mentioned the guys that could get traded, you mentioned Jeff Wilson. Do you think that they can look to trade Mostert to open up a little room for Jalen Wright?
Sure. I mean, I just like that is certainly a situation where, like, if you are in a position where at the trade deadline you're completely out of the race or likely out of the race, yeah, probably get some picks for the guy. But also, you shouldn't have to trade Raheem Mostert to go open up picks for the dynamic rookie. You should just be able to do that. Every other team in the country has no issues of playing the dynamic rookie when he's earned his playing time. The Dolphins seemingly have an issue of doing this every year. So it's like, yeah, like if you can get a fourth or a fifth, like probably a fifth for Raheem Mostert with the way the trades are happening now, like go ahead and do it. But just, I don't think you need to trade the guy to go open up play time for the young player who has looked good. He should just be a part of the offense.
Well, it's frustrating because you mentioned there's a lack of cohesion in the development process. And it seems like for some reason, Chris Greer is drafting guys with a different intention than Mike McDaniel is using these guys. Or they're just both on the same page and that connection is flawed. I'd be really interested to know Mike McDaniel's honest, candid feeling on working with Chris Greer, because I do like McDaniel as a coach. I don't necessarily think I'm ready to give up on the McDaniel experience, but I think for this experience to continue, I think the football-making people need to be McDaniel's guys that he is on the same.
I disagree. I don't think he's earned enough right to be picking GMs. He's made 2 playoff appearances and lost both of those games.
So let me ask you this. Do you think Chris Greer should stay?
No, I think Chris Greer should be fired. And I don't like calling for people's jobs like that, but I think he should be fired.
So if Chris Greer should be fired, do you think McDaniel should be fired, or do you think that McDaniel should be kept but without the decision to make football decisions like picking personnel?
I think he should be kept with the idea that next year is a prove-it year. That next year all the excuses are out the window.
So I think that he should be given a chance to at least be in the room and pick his guy. And I think that they should be a package deal, even if it's 1 year.
But so here's my issue with that. No GM in the NFL is going to take a job that is potentially a 1-year job. Just go hire a good GM.
If that guy thinks I think you should either fully start over or hire somebody. I don't think we should be hiring a GM that'll stay past McDaniel.
My issue with that idea is that I don't think Mike McDaniel has earned enough grace to be able to sit in that room and decide who is running the team with him. That's something that's reserved for Andy Reid and Sean McVay and the likes of those guys who have won. Like, I don't think Mike McDaniel has won enough to do that. Can you hire a guy who is willing to build around Mike McDaniel because you believe in Mike McDaniel? Absolutely. Like, that is going to be a talking point of any GM interview that you do, implying that Chris Greer is not here next year. But it's like, I don't think that Mike McDaniel should have much say in this because I don't think he's earned that right to have say in this.
But I think that, to me, and this is where I start talking about the org chart of this all. I think if we're talking senior level people, director of football operations, guys like that, I think yes. I think those people at a high level, football ops guys, McDaniel has no say over. I personally see a head coach of a team and a general manager of a team on the same level of an org chart.
I don't agree with that.
So
I
to
think
me,
GM is higher.
I think those should be hand in hand. I don't necessarily see a GM as a top exec level position in an organization.
I think it's the highest position in the organization. I think personally, it's like wins and losses are decided based on who you bring in. The NFL is still a league of talent. It's still a league where talent wins. It's like, I know everyone wants to point to like, there are certainly like coaching matters, right? But talent matters more. And so the guy who's responsible for bringing in said talent to me is the most important guy in the room because he's the guy who's going to win you or lose you a Super Bowl more than anyone else. I'm trying to remember his name. The KC GM is Brett Veach, I think. I could be wrong there, but like the Kansas City GM, I would argue is probably slightly more important than Andy Reid because every year they face a new challenge in terms of building this roster. And Andy Reid has a say, don't get me wrong, but it's up to the GM to go get the dudes. It's like, I just like my issue with being here. It's like, well, if we're firing a coach next year, it's like, well, then the GM might get fired too. What GM are you going to be able to hire who you are effectively saying you've got a 1-year tryout for the job?
I think it's a GM that believes in Mike McDaniel. I think it's a GM that thinks that him and Mike McDaniel can turn this around. And it doesn't necessarily have to be you have to win a Super Bowl or you're fired. I think it needs to be you need to clean up what this mess is. To answer that, it's interesting. I actually went while we were here and looked at the Dolphins. I wanted to see the way they listed on their website where they had like their front office and staff. Underneath executives, the first 3 people, the top line is Greer, McDaniel, and Brandon Shore.
It's just like, for me, it's like, I think that you can find a GM who wants to work with Mike McDaniel because he is seemingly a respected coach.
Well, you're not telling this guy that if Mike McDaniel gets fired in a year, he's fired in a year. And it's not a 1-year contract. But I think the assumption is coming in, you're going to bring in a guy to build around McDaniel. And I think that if the McDaniel experience isn't going to work, if you decide in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years that the McDaniel experience doesn't work, then I think at that point you need to completely start over and hire with a clean slate.
Yes, if we get to year 3 of any regime and we still don't know what it is, yes, then we need to go fix it. But it's like the only issue with this, right, is that like if we're talking about it potentially being a 1-year thing, and we're like, I know you're not trying to imply that it's just going to be a 1-year thing, but like if there is at least the non-zero chance that it's a 1-year thing, it's like my only concern with that is that you are handcuffing a GM because GM should not be judged off what they do in 1 year. It's like, so I think that like to some degree, you go find the GM that wants to work with Mike McDaniel because there will be plenty of them. I have no doubts in my mind that there will be plenty that want to work and want to build something with Mike McDaniel. But I also don't think he needs to be tied to Mike McDaniel. If Mike McDaniel doesn't work in a year or 2 years, and you're still building a solid roster, he should be allowed to go pick the head coach that he wants to lead said roster. And like, that is pushing it way down the line for any of us to know for sure. But it's like,
I totally get what you're saying.
It's like, for me, it's like, I think that choosing the GM as the head coach should be reserved for the elite of the elite coaches. And truthfully, Mike McDaniel is probably a better coach than what he showed this year because of the backup quarterback issue, which, I mean, again, he holds weight in the Tua injury, the injuries across the defense. It's like those things will definitely affect the offense and affect the team in general. But I don't think like he should have insight on what he thinks the team should look like, and you should be able to find a GM who has similar ideas. But I don't think this should be a situation where it's like has any say in who's being the GM. You should just be able to find a GM that wants to work with Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, and I think that if you're in a position where we're sitting here saying it's going to be a 1-year thing, and if Stephen Ross, let's say, is going into the hiring process, this is going to be a 1-year thing, I think you've made up your mind at that point on what you think about Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, I mean, if you're treating this as like a 1-year tryout, just fire the fucking coach now, man.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Just go fire the head coach and go let the GM make that decision.
Then you hire the GM and let the GM bring in his coach. But I do think that either way, whichever way you want to spin it, I think that Chris Greer has worn out his welcome in Miami.
I agree.
I think it's time. I think he's had a very long career. Now, you did mention before McDaniel's 0-2 in playoff games. One was with Skylar Thompson, and he was in the game at Buffalo. And honestly, there were a couple small mistakes, a delay a game here, a bad play there from possibly winning that game. And the other one against Kansas City in the coldest game in the history of the NFL. So while, yes, I understand that McDaniel hasn't had a great trajectory or history in big games, I don't think you can necessarily fault him for those specific playoff games.
I don't think you can fault them for that, but I mean, the truth is the reason why you were playing in the coldest game in the history was because you blew the end of the year. Like
the Tennessee game.
Yeah,
like always the Tennessee Titans.
Like the truth is the reason why you were in that situation is because you messed up at the end of the year. And so I don't know, like I think that maybe not the situation of like having a backup quarterback in a playoff game is a difficult situation. Don't get me wrong. But last year, there was a very easy path to not be in that situation. And so just win the games.
Yeah. Kev, we're getting up on an hour here. Before we get off, do the Dolphins have a chance to win on Sunday?
They got a chance.
Will the Dolphins win on Sunday?
I don't think they'll win on Sunday.
What do you think?
They've got a chance. I think they'll make it close because they know that this is the game that they gotta maybe win or at least prove that this is like a year that you could potentially turn around. But I don't think they're winning it. Give me Buffalo by 5, 28-23. That's 5 points.
Let me see what the points are. Let me see what I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm looking at now 48.5.
Dolphins are 6-point dogs. So 5 is such a perfect number. You went 5. I'll say the Dolphins will lose by 4, 31-27.
That feels right.
On Tuesday, which is the trade deadline, I'm sure Brett and I will be in prior to that. But do the Dolphins make a move on or before Tuesday?
No, I don't think they make it. Maybe trading Jeff Wilson is like the move. I don't think they're making any moves that are trading anyone of like any significance.
I could see one of those, Jeff Wilson in a 6th for a 5th or something like that. I could see Raheem Mostert going.
Maybe Mostert. I think they're going to just let him ride out the year, but maybe they let him go.
But other than that, yeah, I don't know if does anybody want Cater?
I think you just keep Cater. I think he's been good enough to earn a second chance. But
if there's a surprise player that the Miami Dolphins trade on Tuesday, who is it?
David Long. I don't think this is. I think that'd be more of an off-season move, but I could see David Long being the surprise player that's moved.
I don't know how far away he is, but the surprise player I'll go with, if he's relatively close to returning, is Bradley Chubb.
I don't think they're trading Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, I just had to give a surprise player.
The surprise player is Tyreek Hill, but they're not trading Tyreek Hill. So,
does anybody in the NFL, I will drive him to your location, want Julian Hill or Durham Smythe?
we will carpool. We will pick up food on the way for them. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've never been to a Buc-ee's, so I'll stop at one along the way and get him up there.
Please take him. For the love of God, just take him.
Kev, I hope that when you and I talk next week that there is a much happier mood. I hope that we are done talking about firing people. As a Dolphin fan, I feel like more of my life is spent talking about firing people, hiring people, signing people, and drafting people than it is talking about actual football.
Yeah, it really is.
Oh, it's sad, man. Are you going to Houston?
No, I'm not. That's the one game I'm doing here because I don't want to travel to Houston again. Done that once, not going to do it again.
Well, good luck to your Wildcats. Enjoy watching football this weekend, man. I hope it's a little bit of a better result for our Dolphins.
Please, for the love of God, I need it, guys. I need it.
Is there anything you want to plug or throw in there before we get out of here?
No, I think we're all good.
All right, man. For my producers, Zach, Mr. S, Donovan, for Brett, who I hope feels better, for Kevin, I am Jordan, guys. Thank you for coming on and being with us for an hour. Have a great night, and post-edit the music in wherever you do, Zach.